All right. Welcome, everyone. We are going to get started here. Thank you for joining us for the continuation of our wellness workshop series. So you should be here for the Mamipreneurship class. I always feel like, because I was an educator, a former professor, and so whenever somebody would walk into the class, you'd be like, make sure you're in Psychology 101. So I feel like I still have the same mañas and the same habits of like, make sure you're in the right classroom. So yes, you should want to be here for Mamipreneurship. We're gonna get started by opening up with some smoke. Carmen is going to take care of that, and then we'll go through introductions. We do have translation available, but I don't know, just from knowing everyone in this space, I don't know that we need translation right now. So Frida and for the rest of the group, what we were thinking of doing was, as soon as we recognize that somebody needs translation, then we'll send you over there. Otherwise, I think it just makes the most sense to kind of keep you here with us, Frida. Is that cool? Okay, I can't hear you, but talk really fast, Frida, because I just want to make sure that we can hear you. I think your audio is being cast to the other. Okay, let's still keep you here though, right? And so does that make sense? Is everyone cool with that? We'll keep you here. If you need to share, just write in the chat for us. And if we need to pull you back in, we will. All right, cool, awesome. Okay, great. I'm gonna turn it over to Carmen so you can open space for us.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. And I just want to lighting some sweetgrass here for each and every one of you. The past few days I was traveling, so I was out in the Dene country along with Paiute country, and then coming back home to Autumn lands. So I'm just really thankful for all these territories, all these peoples, all these nations, and just having each and every one of you in our minds, and all our relatives across Turtle Island. Here's some smoke. Just really thankful for Creator, those traveling, those at home right now, your families, whether it be you're at work or washing dishes or doing whatever you have to do to get by the day, just have you all in mind, offering some smoke here for you, sending these thoughts and prayers up to the Creator in that way. And so just really wanting to acknowledge each of you. I see here, we also have some other relatives from other nations, and just keeping all of you in thoughts and minds, and along with your lineages, your families, your communities. So just like to give thanks to our Autumn relatives here, these Autumn territories, along with those that have migrated throughout the centuries and have brought us here to current place here in Phoenix, for myself, my family, all the teachings we've had in different ceremonial circles, and those different paths in our lives that have brought us to this place to be able to share our own words with you, each and every one of you, our different ceremonial communities that have just ended a cycle as well in the Northern Territories. So for many in this new solstice time of the summer, this new season, new year for many of those in Sundance circles. So just wanting to acknowledge that as well. Just thank you for being here this morning. Thank you to our co-sponsors, Seventh Generation Fund, along with Arizona Department of Health Services, to be able to provide just a little bit about our expertise, our, I wouldn't even say expertise, just things that we went through to get to this point to be able to share with you today as a collective, as individuals, as mothers, as caregivers, and just really thankful for that. So um, I'm okay. Enjolie, I don't know if you want to prompt or ask anybody about being visible on the screen or not, which is fine. Um, but just wanting to throw that out there again, if you wanted, if you're okay with that before we keep going.
Yeah, so obviously we're, we're sharing this on our Facebook page, and we're also recording so that we can continue to share this content with other folks. So it's up to you, if you would like to be, if you would like to be visible. There will be times for questions. I would say actually throughout, you can come in, come off your screen and ask questions, or open your mic up. But so yeah, go ahead and do what feels best for you.
Perfect. Thank you. So here's that. I'll have that sweetgrass going for us throughout the session. And then just really asking, everybody envision this sweetgrass, these medicines that we have here, this fire. Take a few seconds to just envision that flame there, and the smoke that is burning, releasing from the sweetgrass that's burning. And then just a deep breath for everybody to be able to start this off in a good way. Okay, all right. I'll just dip right in then. Are we good with that, Enjolie? Okay. So just want, again, just, a little bit about the collective. We've been in our, now I think coming on to our 6th year of being a collective, with maybe half of that time now as an actual nonprofit, and being able to share space about all our teachings, our experiences from what we've spoken. I know Enjolie always says this, is working from womb to tomb, pretty much sharing about our birthing experiences, our womb healing, our just as experience as peoples, as community. And then every time, which we're going to cover briefly, touch on, is every time something happens and something else, we have a reaction to something happening in our lives. So and that's how the collective came about. That's how a lot of the information we're going to share today came about. So also wanting to give gratitude for myself. If you don't know me, my name is Maria del Carmen Parra Cano. I am the daughter of Maria Cristina Parra Martinez from Texcoco, Mexico. And Texcoco is right outside of Teotihuacan, which is down outside of Mexico City. And so our lineage is started there many, many, many years ago. In my father's side, we are actually Raramuri or Tarahumara, from Cuauhtemoc, Chihuahua. And so my family originally migrated here in the 80s, because as you see in the presentation, my parents were tailors, or would actually, my parents would make outfits for mariachis. And so because of those and the work that they had here, traveling back and forth across the border in the 80s, and prior to myself being born, the mariachis actually in Arizona, Tucson, and especially Southern Arizona, those in Tucson, those in Phoenix, organized and actually sponsored my family's visa to come to Phoenix. And so part of not only the art and the culture, but also appreciative for them doing this for my family and bringing them here. My parents at the time had 3, 4, my mother, before arriving to Phoenix, had already birthed three, four, five children. Um, and so I was the first of my generation to be born here in Phoenix, along with my two younger sisters. So just wanting to share a little bit about that family history, along with, early in high school, being a community organizer, um, and finding other communities such as Dona Tierra, and being able to share and learn from the Calpuleque there, the families of families who have, really honing back in when it comes to knowing who we are as Indigenous peoples on this continent, and then also being able to live that through ceremony, live that through the danza azteca, through, our connection with Mother Earth, whether it be through plants, through food, through physically touching the ground. That's really appreciative for that. And that started, I was a organizer through Mecha in high school, went on to my undergrad at ASU, was a Mechista there. And I ended up getting my undergraduate degree from Arizona State University in nonprofit administration and sociology. And it was a 10-year plan, and like others, because I was busy organizing, I was trying to organize with different, the political aspect of things, and really trying to promote community rights, human rights, people's rights, and so this kind of goes hand in hand with some of the work that we do now is like, as to take care of our families. And sometimes this is all encompassing, right? And then just appreciative, I am a mother of four, three earth side, one in the spirit world. My oldest is 8. The second one is 6. The third one, like I mentioned, was a boy, Ayakoyani, and so he has passed on. And our last one is now 3 years old. And so I'll kind of be mentioning them because they're a part of the story. They're part of what we've done and what we do, and just all inclusive. And then another picture here of this is my immediate family. I'm one of 9 siblings, and so, all different experiences. My sisters will talk about how when they first arrived here in the 80s, early 80s, they went through that fear of not knowing where they were going to live or eat or things like that. And so just really wanting to acknowledge them. And so also thinking, because the picture, I'm sorry, the picture includes my brother who passed away, the female. And so just really grateful for them, what they've been through, and how we've evolved from that. Okay, so just mentioned a little bit, my husband is Brian, who's included within this story as well. So really thankful for him and the impact we've been able to share as a family, as a unit, and being able to help support other people as well. Enjolie?
All right. We can okay, great. I don't know if there's a lag. I was only seeing a portion of the pictures. And so thank you for cueing me. And Carmen, I just want to, like honor and give space for your grief and your brother. And, it's a privilege to be your comadre, but I've been able to kind of see, your walk with grief, and your brother's has taken time, for you to digest. So I'm glad that it's starting, or another piece of another layer of it, is getting taken care of right now. So all right. So, I feel like we're here with our friends right now. So, but most of you, I don't know if all of you have been able to see, pictures of my family, because there are some that I don't share very often. Like most of us, right? My family story is a migration story. So, on my father's side, we are Afro-Cuban, and so we are Taino and Arawak. And so on the bottom left corner, I have actually my great grandmother, who I didn't get to meet in life, right? But when I started doing some of the work that I do, for example, being a hypnotherapist, she started coming to me. And so primarily through this picture. Above her, I have actually my grandfather. So I have my two grandfathers in the top left corner. And so my grandfather, Humberto, he is from Guatemala, so we're Maya. And next to him, I actually have my paternal grandfather, whose name is Radames Lafaurie. And same thing, I did not meet my grandfathers. I think something that we'll talk about as well is that as birthers, as women, as individuals who have like the need to hustle. Both of my grandmothers had the need to hustle because the story between their relationship with my grandfathers was not so pleasant, you know. So the story is that both of my grandmothers left their children for a time in the respective countries that they were coming from. They immigrated on their own and then they sent back for their kids. And for some, first for my maternal grandmother, that was, it was relatively quick. She had a lot of support in that process. And then for my paternal grandmother, that process took a long time. It actually took 7 years. And so then my great grandmother raised my father for that time. So next to the couple, right, the darker skinned couple, that's my grandmother. And that's actually the only grandfather that I knew. So although he's not my biological grandfather, this is Norris Delphos, and he's Jamaican. And so sometimes y'all will also hear me talk about, having Jamaican roots, and that comes, through that cultural exposure. And then top right, you have my parents in the middle, and then my maternal and paternal grandmother. I think it was like an engagement party or something. I don't know, something fun. I love old pictures too. It's so nice to be able to get to see our family and our parents in these ways. Okay, so then below I have my siblings, which are a really big part of just who I am. I just, I always, grief and loss is actually a really big part of my story. And I'll explain that in a moment. But because of the experiences that I've had with grief and loss, I've always thought to myself that like the losing of a sibling must be one of the most challenging things because you spend so much time with them. Parents, we're prepared for, elders we're prepared for, but there's so much of our everyday existence. So I'm that close, to my siblings. I'm actually physically in my sister's house right now and traveling and visiting with them. I told you I would talk about grief, and just by way of my introduction as well. So I'm a widow. I actually, and that is my husband pictured with me there. So 12 years ago, I just hit a 12-year anniversary. Both my husband and my father passed away a day apart from one another. And they're actually both of them are really integral to the things that I'm going to share, because it was my husband that primarily exposed me to a lot of like kind of the business know-how that I have. He modeled it for me. And then my father also, he took the plunge. I got to see a parent take the plunge from 9 to 5 type work and start a restaurant business that ultimately failed. And I think in some of the things that we'll talk about, I want to discuss some failures because that has been a part of business ownership and entrepreneurship. So anyway, just want to give space for them and the things that they taught me. And then the last picture is my daughter. So it's actually my daughter and her mother as well. And I really appreciate this image because yeah, I also want to honor her parents, and when I talk about her, I wouldn't have my daughter without her mom, her biological mom, and also her father. And yeah, just really in love with my daughter. So, and she's actually one of the people who is commenting in on Facebook. So I really appreciate you, Beyonce, always supporting your mother. Okay. So yeah, that's, in a nutshell, kind of who I am as far as the people who came before me. Some of the other parts of who I am, if you can advance to the next slide, Carmen. Professionally, I've mentioned some of these. I'm also a psychologist, right? I'm a hypnotherapist. I'm a death midwife for the collective. I act as, first a co-founder and a comadre, but then also kind of on paper as a COO and CFO. I carried something over. from your slide, Carmen, that I'm noticing. Anyway, and I've owned, we'll talk about this, but I've owned 3 businesses before, things that I maybe don't mention as much that inform, right, the things that I give, the things that I share with the collective. So yeah, also, if you all want to share who you are in the comments, feel free to kind of tell us who you are, tell us your name, maybe, where you're at and what your relationship is, to entrepreneurialism or business ownership as we kind of continue on. Next slide, Carmen. Yeah, I'll have you take this on. We can't hear you.
Sorry,
Okay.
I was trying to unmute and the screen sharing is not fun. So, but I just wanted to share this image was done by an artist, Ernesto Llerena, many years ago, who's based out of LA. But I really like the messaging it gives. Is like, controlling your community with ganas. But what I see as a mommypreneur, entrepreneur, social entrepreneur that I consider myself, all you need is the ganas. In Spanish, we say ganas. In English, you say like the will, the motivation, the energy to be able to do something. And so just wanted to share that and put that out there, because I think a lot of times we don't find the inspiration, we don't find the motivation, especially being at home. If you're a stay-at-home parent, if you're trying to figure out your hustle, trying to see how to do things away from a regular 9 to 5, or even if you have a 9 to 5, how else, if you need to supplement, how else can you do that, doing that. And so I'm really thankful that we're able to share with you today, because I feel kind of learning from what we've done, but then also learning our roses and our thorns, like giving our positives, what's pained us in our process, but then sharing that with each of you. And really just seeing how, in my mind, when I started, when I was a stay-at-home mom for the first time, for me, it was like, what do I have to do for my children? What do I have to do for my family? Not that I immediately needed to do anything, but in the back of my mind, being a child of entrepreneurs, my parents, my father still, my mom passed away years ago, but my dad still tries to hustle, for himself and do things. So I have that mentality, I have that background. And so I feel like that's why we're always trying to do, how can we be better? How can I be better as an individual? How can I help? And then how can I support others at the same time? Enjolie?
Yeah. And continuing on with, Carmen's, the way that she kind of interprets ganas, right? And needing to have the will, to do what you need to do, to hustle, to take care of yourself. We also want to connect this, right, to the act of birthing. So in Spanish, it's actually, I prefer, when we talk about giving birth, in Spanish, you say dando luz, which if we translated that directly, would be like giving light, or creating light, giving birth to light. And so my dissertation was actually related to mothers who used, particular methods of hypnosis to birth. And as I prepared and as I did all the literature reviews and the research, there was actually a wonderful body of literature around that when people are pregnant, when people are going through the birthing process, that they're more creative, they're more intuitive, they're more open. In some ways, I think we're able to also take more calculated risks. One, because we kind of maybe feel that we have to, right? We're planning for the security, right, of our next generation. But aspects of that we need the freedom, to be able to be a parent and then also to make money. That we like if there's ever a time to put it all out there, right? It's the time to put it all out there, right? When we're considering our children. So one of the main things I want you all to hear with this image, and then also with the things that we share today, is that I think sometimes as birthers, many of us identifying as women, we don't see ourselves in the business narrative or the entrepreneurial narrative. And my hope is that as you hear us, as we all talk, that you'll be like, oh, you know what, there's all these things that I do that kind of make me a natural business owner, make me a natural entrepreneur. It just hasn't been highlighted and hasn't been recognized. And the point that I'm ultimately making here is, and it started with your process of even just going through being a pregnant person and potentially birthing, right? Because it's that love, and it's that innate need for survival, for your survival and the survival of those who follow you, that gives you the ganas, to be able to kind of create something. And there's lots of different ways to create. And so we're going to talk about that. Go ahead, Carmen, I'll throw it back to you.
So thank you, Enjolie. I think just to share a little bit of the process, that my personal experience, I wanted to share this quick video. It's only a minute, just showing just what we do. So I'll go ahead and share that now.
My name is Maria del Carmen Parra. I am born in Phoenix. A lot of the work that we do, my husband and I, Brian Cano, and I do, is all focused about healing our community and also commemorating my mother. In 2015, we decided to create 2 DBAs that would narrow our focus on the impacts we wanted to make in the community. Ironwood Metalworks is a custom metal and wood fabrication company focused on high-end furniture, metal signage, and custom home and commercial products. That same year, Indigena was created with the goal to honor my mother and our ancestors by affirming our indigenous ways through the art of sewing, cultural education, and empowering parents through baby wearing. We are focusing on rebosos and ringsings made out of fair trade fabrics from Mexico and Guatemala. After the birth of our last daughter, Tonalitzli, I was diagnosed with postpartum preeclampsia and hypertension. During the cuarentena time, we've really focused on eating healthy foods and a plant-based diet. Really think that this is what helped cure what ultimately became curing my diabetes. Our goal is to show people how to cook plant-based foods, making them healthy for them and not having to suffer from preventable diseases like diabetes and hypertension.
So that was just a little bit about what we do as a family. There's so much more to it. Every time the when we had our first daughter, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because I want to see faces. So, so when when I was pregnant with my first daughter, everything was new for us. Brian at the time was a high school environmental science teacher. I was expecting. He tore his ACL, those, and he's probably going to be embarrassed that I'm sharing this, but those high school events where they have teacher versus students and they play basketball sometimes and compete. Well, he got injured as he was playing and ended up tearing his ACL and being at home for the rest of the school year. So I ended up, at the time, I was still working nonprofit. I had worked for a local agency here. It was fairly large, as their director of community engagement. And so I oversaw different programs like immigration services, youth services, prevention and education services. I traveled throughout the state to be able to go to different sites. We had a site in Yuma, we had sites in Tucson, we had sites in Northern Arizona. So I was doing all this while expecting. My mom at the time would get so nervous, make sure you have your phone. If you go into labor, you call, or you go straight to the hospital, things like that, like any other nana, at the time. And so I ended up being induced because I ended up having gestational diabetes with my first pregnancy. And then had her via C-section, had to focus that time around healing my body. But then I also experienced a lot of trauma associated with her birth, because I had tried to birth naturally, vaginally, and that didn't happen because she ended up getting stuck. And so we had to rush into emergency surgery after being in labor for almost 2 days, and so that was a different experience for me that I had envisioned in my mind. Like, when everybody who's ever birthed a child, you have your birth plan, right? You have the birth you envision in your head and your heart, and that did not happen for me. And so part of my own mourning process of not having that experience was, what am I going to do? Like guilt, feeling bad on myself. I was able to breastfeed her, body feed her for a few weeks, until from one day to the next, my milk just stopped. And so then that was another thing that I had to deal with in the morning of that, not having that process with her. And then I thought, well, I didn't even prep for any, like, I didn't have bottles. I didn't have anything like that, because in my mind, I was going to be able to feed her this way, right? And so during that time was a lot of grieving for me, call it postpartum blues, or not, however you like to see it. I think for me, it was more like I felt a failure because I couldn't birth the way I wanted to, and I couldn't feed the way I wanted to at that time with her. So I ended up going, after my cuarentena, or like the postpartum period, which in Spanish is like the 40 days after birth. I went back to work, and then was told that the organization was shifting, and that I had bad time. This is what they actually told me, that I had bad timing getting pregnant, because then I was let go. So I went back to work. They told me I had 2 weeks left. And then after being nonprofit, after 10 years, working full time, being independent, doing things, I was like, well, shoot, what does this mean? I have a newborn daughter. I had my husband who was a teacher and was injured, so what am I going to do? So always being, in my mind, I had to figure something out, and so that's when we shared briefly about Indigena, was not only commemorating my mother, but seeing as a way to help educate community and bond with my child, through baby wearing, using the rebozo. So we were, Indigena was born, and I was able to help support people, my family in that process, but then also in my, the way I envisioned it was helping support other mothers in other countries who are trying to do the same thing and supporting their families and their communities through fair trade, sourcing. So that's what I ended up doing in Amatlan, in Guatemala, and then also finding weavers trying to get as close to my mother's community as possible. And so that's where Indigena sources those items, and I work directly with the weavers. And it's very beautiful to see that and hear about, the family weaves the rebozos, the elders in the community weave the fringe, weave each fringe of each rebozo. And with that, the prayers, the thoughts, the teachings that come along with that. So I really, the rebozo to me is not just a shawl or garment. It's an actual sacred tool that we use to help birth and care for our families. And so I'm very fortunate to be able to share that, the blessings of the rebozo, but then also in other ways that other birthing families and practitioners have actually used the rebozo to support during, pregnancy, birthing, and postpartum. We also then, after the birth of my second child, I'm trying to think, it always goes in order of birth of the children's births. So I'm trying to think of what else. With Kisani. Okay, so then I'm trying to think of and I think it's on the PowerPoint. So let me start sharing again before I forget. There we go. Oh, sorry about that.
That's a true entrepreneur right there, where your children's births are associated with the businesses you started.
It is, it's true, because when we started Chicano Chop Shop, it was before the children were in the transitional phase about where for Brian, what did he envision, where did he want us to start. So that's when we created Chicano Chop Shop, Ironwood Metalworks. Indígena was was right after Kisani was born. That's who Indígena. So that's the number 2. Also, I got my culinary arts degree in 2005 because my parents had become diabetic. And so I wanted to help them eat better, learn about food. And so that was a whole other journey that's taken me, like we briefly saw in the video. And so I have been doing food since 2005. And so weaving that in, now as a mom, a stay-at-home mom, I was like, well, I could go back to catering. I could go back to doing things that had a food focus because I had to, right? Because I was trying to bring our family forward, And then that same year, 2015, the Cihuapactli Collective was born, and that was after the birth of our second child, Kisani. And the collective itself also really helped during that time, the birth of our third child, who ended up transitioning at 16 weeks. And so after his birth, we were able to start learning about healing our bodies, learning how to support one another in a birth setting. So as birth support for one another, I'm still really thankful to those of the collective who were able to support me as having, my comadrona or my midwife there. Angelita was there to support us, an elder of the collective. And then we also had many other of the members who were there to help support my family when it came to food, when it came to caring for the other babies, helping support my husband at that same time. Because it takes a community. It takes people to help. I know a lot of times it's harder when we don't have the immediate family in the area, or if we're migrant people, so we come from different places and our immediate family aren't with us. But I'm really fortunate to have been able to help support and create this community along with the other founders. And how can we support and heal each other, right? And then the last birth of the child was Sana Sana, which you saw in the video, being able to heal our bodies through food and continue this process of how it saved me. I was bedridden after postpartum with Donalitzli, with postpartum preeclampsia, bedridden, placed on all these medications that put me at risk of a heart attack, stroke, and a seizure. Went completely plant-based and focusing on indigenous foods for the next 3 months. After that, I went to my checkup, and they told me I no longer needed diabetes medication, hypertension medication, as well as, which I didn't know at the time, I had stage 4 liver disease, and that was all reversed through, I think, the healing from having my child, but then also the foods that we focused on during that healing time. And so that's why, I really tried to help support other mothers, other parents when it comes to that. And then Goat in 2019 or 2019, Goat, which is another DBA of ours that my husband leads up, really trying to refocus our connection as indigenous people, but then connecting that with the land. How can we do this and still doing, being outdoors and connecting people outdoors? So the other last thing that's not on here, something recent as of a few months ago, is that my husband and I joined what we call the Food Forest Cooperative, and we're forming that now. And so we're really trying to help actually create an indigenous food forest in Phoenix, but then also more focus on food, more focus on connecting to the land, planting the seeds, growing the food, getting things ready to be able to then share it with community. And so that's what we're currently doing right now.
Thank you. And Carmen used the phrase DBA, so doing business as, and we'll, go through some of the structures as well. But, if there's any vocabulary words that we just jargon that we just throw out, and you have a question, please feel free to ask, whether it's in the chat or coming off your microphone and opening that up. So yes, as I said previously, right, I've owned 3 businesses before. I know this is a little out of order, but it's okay. I'll start with the first one pictured. So in 2009, this was my second business, and it was a transcription and translation company titled Word Magic. At the time, because I am bilingual, what I was doing was I was working for a market research firm. And they were asking a lot of me, right? They were asking me to be the researcher in the field. They were asking me to do translation. They were asking me to transcribe interviews, and just really quickly, like I received multiple requests for all of those things that I shared, all those services that I shared, in like a day's time, and my immediate response was like, no, I can't. I can't do all that. I have to decline the work. However, because I had experience, it's like I quickly kind of got it, like, hold on, give me 24 to 48 hours and I will come back, and I know I have friends, I know I have people that can provide all these services, and I can be the individual who kind of administers or administrates the work, right, in the service. That was definitely kind of just an entrepreneurial moment, to be able to kind of recognize that I was being asked for a lot of things that one person couldn't do themselves. And I was like, okay, how do I duplicate myself, right? How do I make myself ×5? Right. And then also the role of relationship, right? Because we all know so many people with amazing talents and skills. And also, I think, oftentimes we don't think about education along with entrepreneurship, but because at the time I was in graduate school, because I had such a big network of people that were so talented, there was a pool of folks that I knew I could pull on to kind of do all this important work, of making information accessible in multiple languages. So yeah, that was literally the fastest business I have ever started up, literally in a matter of days. And then in 2013, so my husband and my father passed away in 2012. And absolutely, I know for a fact, like, if you ask me what I did in my grief, like I started businesses, that's kind of what I did. It was, one of the ways was like to kind of put my energy into motion. And I was very fortunate, I'll share that a lot of my earlier ventures came through the support of partnership. I had a partner at the time, and I had friends and family at the time. We knew an amazing, talented baker who was both Guatemalan and Italian. And so that's where the title of pan in Spanish, pane, bread, right? In Italian, Pane Bakery came along, and that bakery was actually in Guadalupe, so in Yaqui territory, and it was a lot of fun. Whenever anyone sees the bread, they wonder if I was the baker. I was not, but I sure ate a lot of bread. I provided, right, some of the operationalization. It's a hard word to say. I was ops. The idea of having somebody take an idea and scale it, and just like, okay, how do we set this up? How do we set up the business, and then how do we make it work? And again, work quickly, because most of the times when we're starting businesses, we don't feel like we have a lot of time because we're investing so much money and we're needing to see a quick return, right? So anyway, that was kind of my role. And I so proudly say that this was a failed business, right? It was a failed business in so many ways. And it was the best I put in $20,000 of my own money. So it was the best $20,000 that I ever spent, because I feel like I got an applied MBA. This business taught me that regardless of the content of what the business was centered around, that I had some sort of acumen, you know, to be able to scale businesses from zero to something else, you know, and that the principles of business, like how you set things up in infrastructure, whether it's transcribing, whether it's therapy, whether it was bread, like that, like, okay, there's a little bit of skill here. So I had a lot of fun, you know, even like as I talk about it, I can feel my energy, you know, like shift when I was talking about it. It was, for me, it was a high, and it still is, you know, it's probably one of my most favorite things to do, to scale businesses. But anyway, the reason why it was a failed business, and I want to, you know, again, be super transparent about it, because although a lot of the 4 people that were there were skilled, we had very different working styles. We had very different ethics, you know, ethical standards, and that came apart, you know, and that revealed itself really quickly. So again, failed business, the best failure I've ever had. I would do it again. I would throw $20,000 down the drain again to learn everything I learned in that year of my life, and doing that work. I don't even look at it as a loss, to be honest. All right, and then the first business, which is still the business that I have now, in 2007. So I shared, you know, that I'm a hypnotherapist. And although I was in school and I was working on completing my doctorate in psychology, I also kind of went down the road to a local holistic school. So I will shout out Southwest Institute of the Healing Arts because I love them. And I got licensed as a hypnotherapist. And I really appreciate that their model and just their philosophy as a school is one of marketing and being able to kind of transform the things that you're learning into a viable business. Anyway, so I quickly started, right, again, an LLC, and all of mine have been LLC, limited liability corporations, yeah. All of mine have been LLCs because they provided a protection, right? So that I could do the work, and if something challenging happened, you know, through the service that I was offering, I wouldn't be liable. The business would be liable up to a point. So I did that so that I could start seeing clients again as a hypnotherapist. And that's always been, so, you know, I've built a small private practice, and that business has grown with me. It has shut down when I've been busy and haven't been able to do as much, and have been educating myself. And then now, and there's been some rebranding that has been going on. So that's, sorry, the business title is Inspired Therapies. And I would say that that's probably my umbrella company, right? So anything and everything that I do, it's my oldest company. Things will always kind of fall under Inspired Therapies. And then this year I started rebranding into I Am Enjolie, right? And just doing some more media-based work, continuing, right, with seeing clients. But the evolution, you know, of how that direct service, how I use literally myself as a gift, how I use myself to take care of myself and my family, you know, that is what's evolving through I Am Enjolie. And it's really like, I feel the difference in how I'm talking about it too. I feel shy, but I feel like it's something that I'm having to step out and like, no, this is who you are. These are all the things that I have to offer to the world, you know? So just because we do all this amazing work doesn't mean that we're not insecure about it, doesn't mean that we're not scared about it. I think I'm a really good example of that. It's just that we're able sometimes to push ourselves and do it anyway, you know? All right, next slide. Thank you for letting me share that. I don't know if it's taking a second for me for the next slide to show up on my end, Carmen, or okay, there we go. Yeah, so
Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just going to do a transition, yeah, a segue. But so basically, you know, we really wanted you all to kind of hear the stories of how we came to be, you know, how this work came to be. But then we also wanted to give you some specifics of like, okay, so if you're going to start a business, at least focus in Arizona, these are the steps. And then we can also have some conversations about what it might be like in other states. Really fast, though, I do want to, I just want to remind you all that if you have questions or comments, feel free to use chats, come off your microphone. You know, I just don't want you all to feel like we're just talking, you know, over and at you. So go ahead, Carmen.
Sure. So like Enjolie shared, it's, you know, taking care of pets, whether it be a photographer, you know, if you're doing your own type of even education services, things like that, you could structure things in a very different way. And so this is just an image of the Arizona Corporation Commission, because if you're based in Arizona, any type of business structures that you want to create or implement, this is the website that you would need to go on to be able to create this. And this is just like they have an e-core, which you could file paperwork online. Sometimes they turn it around right away, whether it be a limited liability corporation, like Enjolie mentioned. You could do a sole proprietorship, which is just you as an individual having a business license. And then depending on what you do, what you choose to do, if it's food, there's so many different permits and licenses you need for that. If it's a consulting firm or whatever you're doing, you know, as a consultant, you need less of so there's so many different layers, and we could go into specifics if anybody wants to put that in the chat as far as what direction you or questions you may have directly. But the Arizona Corporation Commission is where you could go on their site, search directly for a business name, see if it's available or not. If it's, you know, even as if you're a baby wearing educator, if you're a birth worker, I would recommend forming an LLC, a limited liability corporation, that helps, like Enjolie had mentioned, helps protect you and your family in case anything were to happen, any legal activities, say you get sued for whatever reason, they could come after the LLC, but not you as an individual. So that's one way to do it. This site is also used when you, if you're starting a nonprofit, you know, this is something you would also go and access along with the IRS, with irs.gov, to be able to file your forms to be able to become an actual nonprofit. And on the next slide, we'll continue to go through them, but there's a lot more links that we could share. And we could also, I'll be happy to email things out to everybody who registered for this. But then you could also do a lot of the, you know, you could Google for some of the links as well. So one of the first thing, like I mentioned, the choosing a name, go on to the site, search it there. You could also put a hold on a name. If you don't plan to fill out the forms right away, you could go on the website and reserve it so that nobody else could take it. I would then go on to, you know, it says purchase a domain name. If it's a website, register it. And then also that would be through a different entity. That would not be from, so when we created Goa, because Goa is in the Nahuatl language, we're like, well, there's probably something already called Goa. And so we actually went through first on online and we just Googled Goa and saw what came up, you know. So depending on the name that you choose for your business, I would do some research and make sure there's nothing out there, at least in the United States or Arizona, that could that people could actually could draw people away from you. So changing it to either LLC, adding something at the end of it, you know, or changing the name completely.
And actually,
And then
you know,
when we said, go ahead.
Carmen, yeah, can I jump in? I would actually also recommend just going to some of the major websites, you know, and typing in to see if your, like, whatever name you want, if that website is available, because that'll also often lead you to the business if it already exists. And then you can make a decision, you know, of like, not only just is the website available, but is the business already titled that? And it makes a difference if is the business titled that the same name in your state versus in another state. If it's another state, it's less of an issue, right? Versus in your state, but then you're also going to have to think about the branding part of like, oh yeah, okay, what's the website? I know when people Google, are they then going to also find and get connected to this other business that's similarly named?
Right. Thanks for adding that, Enjolie. Oh, sorry. So then if you're trying to think out what's the best type of entity, you know, there's what they consider on paper corporations, nonprofits, and like LLCs, like we've mentioned already. Just finding what's the best structure. For an LLC, you need at least you at least need, I believe you need at least 2 people to join. And then there's also cooperatives that could be created as well through the Arizona Corporation Commission. So then you would need, you know, depending on who's part of the cooperative, to incorporate that as well. For the nonprofit, you do need a board. You know, you need people to be able to sign off on the incorporation documentation. And for a corporation, it just depends if it's an S corp, a C corp. Most business entities that are not, don't have LLC at the end, or not a .org, like a nonprofit, are either an S or a C corp. And so that's what needs to be. And there's different types of things when it comes to taxes and the legality of all that stuff. But we will provide those links to do more research if you choose to. Yes, and then securing the name, like I mentioned, you could go on there and reserve. You could also go through the Secretary of State, which is something we've done in the past. So we have the LLC. And when we mentioned DBAs, is a doing business as. So the DBAs, you could create, you could have like, it's an umbrella company. And then beneath that, you have other entities like the DBA of Indigena, which falls under, for us, Chicano Chop Shop. So Indigena is our one of our DBAs, along with Ironwood Metalworks. So because we wanted to keep the same umbrella, we just created other DBAs under that. So you could still do that and then go on the website and see through the Secretary of State, making sure that names are available, and then you actually trademark your DBA. So trademarks are also a good thing to start thinking of, especially if you have items that produce a product, and then or if you're the product, you have your trademark too, and then you could be as descriptive, whether it be a logo and different a phrase, a tagline that you could put in there as well. Okay, and then filing the fee, which is minimal. I'm glad to say that Arizona actually has a really minimal fee for these forms, anywhere from $25 to $40. It all just varies on expediting, how fast do you need these forms returned, how fast you want to be official, because all these forms, you need to have these to be able to go open a bank account under the business name. So the faster you have the forms, the faster you're able to function as a business. The other good thing that you're able to do with the IRS is you could retro date forms to say like, oh, how long have you been in business? Or how long has the entity existed? And if you've been functioning on the low for years doing things, you could definitely go back and say, oh, I was covered since 2016 or something like that. And then nobody likes this part, but we have to do it as a business owner. And this is registering through the Arizona Department of Revenue. And I also have the link here in another slide for you to go through and access. If you're from a different state, please visit your Department of Revenue website and see what you have to do to register with them and what forms you would need. And then depending on the type of business you have, certain city, county, and business licensing. Like I mentioned, like say the bakery, I could only think of what the bakery needed to have in process to be able to sell, to be able to even open doors or produce a product. Same thing as catering. We have to have different things in line, business licenses, permits, things like that. So food specifically is a whole different animal that we could go into probably on a part 2 of just food establishments, because I feel like for even your local elotero or like the corn vendor, they have to go through so many things just to be able to sell you some corn, and so I just want to put that out there. Anybody dealing with food, let us know. We'll get to you. We'll have another session to focus just on that, because that's a whole different animal. If you're doing as a consultant or working as an individual, like you providing a service for people, like say whether it be tutoring or even a birth support or cleaning houses or anything like that, you're actually physically providing the service to somebody, then you don't need specific licensing, but you do need city, probably just be able to like, file your tax. Or TIN, which is a tax ID number or employee identification number. And so this is actually something you would go through the IRS website, which the links also, we have that ready for you. And once you have all these papers or access to them, whether it be through PDF or just printing them out, is when you go to the bank and actually open your bank account. So for me, I found it easier to actually go through credit unions just because I like credit unions personally. And some credit unions do not do business accounts. So if you want a specific business account to be able to track expenses, because having your business, you're also then allowed to have tax write-offs for anything having to do with your business. So if you're a birth worker, if you purchase anything for a client to be able to help them in their practice, in their birthing process, that's a tax write-off. You know, teachers can also do the same thing. Teachers, you could write off any supplies they purchase for the classroom. And so there's so many different ways to look at it. But when it comes to the bank, your business account, just, you know, visit, if you're already banking with somebody, just ask them what they do for businesses and see if that might work better for you. And these are some of the links, and thank you, Enjolie, for adding them in the chat. We have irs.gov. There's a breakdown in more detail of different business structures in Arizona, as well as a checklist that you might want to go through, say, okay, I did this, what's next? And then I included a link to the Women's Resource Center just because I think they also provide online right now virtual trainings on Excel, on Word documents, on how to make a spreadsheet, you know, things like that, things that a lot of us take for granted that not everybody has access to that and is familiar with that. So basic record keeping. So they provide a lot of different trainings. So I would recommend that. And then again, the Arizona Department of Revenue, because as a business entity, you could choose to file your taxes either monthly, quarterly, or annually. And it all depends on the type of business. It will allow for certain things. So like as an independent consultant, you probably just get a 1099 and you can file your taxes at the end of the year. You still have to file with the state though, on a either quarterly or monthly basis. And then when you do your taxes, that's a whole other part when it comes down to, like for me, when I file my personal taxes is when I file all my business federal taxes. So, and I actually do those myself. So I'm able to go through and we use QuickBooks. You could use different financial tracking software to be able to say, okay, this was an expense for the business. Oh, I had a purchase, if you rent a location for your business and you have utilities and different things you have to spend, being able to track that is the best way, because then that's a tax write-off. So there's different perks to the business side of it. It just depends on how involved and how ready you are, because like I mentioned, we do things as a family and individual. We maintain all of it, the finances to my husband's a welder and he's building stuff, but or like me in the kitchen, I'm cooking things, but I'm also keeping track of all finances, submitting all the reports to the IRS, things like that. But you don't have to do it alone. You could always outsource to a third party, be able to keep track of all this stuff, whether it be through, ADP, if you have payroll, if you're planning on hiring people. Like I mentioned, QuickBooks already. I'm a big fan of QuickBooks because it's simple, and they also provide where you could actually pay yourself through your business, being able to get to the point, build it enough so that as an entrepreneur, you don't have to exploit yourself. A lot of times we think, no, I have to keep going. I have to keep doing something. But what you want to do, and what I wanted to do early on as a first-time stay-at-home mom, was I wanted to get paid, for what I was doing, even as minimal as it was. I wanted to try to get paid because that's what I wanted. I was used to doing. I was used to writing for myself, as an individual for so many years. So there's different things you could put in place, different companies that you could hire for a minimal monthly rate to be able to track all this stuff for you. And a lot of times they even fill out they file your taxes for you. So that's just being able to find what works for you.
And I think, I'll add, I would say that this has also evolved, to be some of the collective's work, to kind of be fiscal agents, right, for different organizations, right, which is different than businesses and nonprofits. But there's just there, you don't have to do it alone, is what I want you to hear. And my reason for sharing that, there are a lot of entities and individuals that will help you kind of get started. And so if that's within your budget and within your means, do things in community. I think one of the hard parts is that when we talk about entrepreneurship, when we talk about business ownership, it often is coming from like a masculinist, or male model, a capitalist model. We'll talk about social entrepreneurship, and but there are many other ways. In fact, they're older than what we know. They're older than what we're seeing. No shade to anyone who like is making your millions and billions. Good for you. But they're not, they weren't the first ones who did that, and there's lots of ways to take care of yourself in your community. So Carmen and I often, Carmen, Brian and I often talk a lot about, definitions. I can't leave Brian out. Definitions of, what it is to be an entrepreneur versus a business owner, right? Even the title of our event, right? We talked about, a Mamipreneur. There are some subtle differences, and our logic and reasoning for bringing this up is because I think so often people feel like they don't see themselves. I think a lot of times people count themselves out of this entrepreneur or business owner bucket because you're only used to seeing Elon Musk, or you're only used to seeing, all these high demand, high driven, highly focused, right, male models. So the bottom line of what I want you, to understand for an entrepreneur is it's somebody who is able to take something from nothing and then scale it up to something that is visible, something that is tangible. Entrepreneurs are often leveraging the goods, the service, the talents of other people, and profiting off of that, that's part of if there's any kind of like rubs that some of us have either individually or in our family or culturally, it's this idea of making money off of other people, right? However, that is the way that, that is what it is to do business, right? One person cannot do everything, right? And so there are ways to do things where you're transparent and you're in a good relationship and you have knowledge and know-how and you're being paid for that, right? But it's just an important conversation for us to kind of revisit what is our relationship to this idea, of how we make money, and acknowledging that capitalism and entrepreneurism has been harmful, right, to a lot of people who look like us, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. Did you want to add something in, Carmen? Or no, you're just touching your hair. Okay. It's like when the students are like, I think I'm raising my hand. Okay. Anyway, so versus a business owner, right? A business owner is somebody who maybe has specific knowledge, specific know-how, and they like to do the infrastructure, right? They like the day-to-day aspects of running a business. They like figuring out, hey, when I put the lids here, the customers like are able to pick up the lids and make less mess and kind of leave the store or leave the restaurant or whatever it is in an easier fashion, right? They like figuring out the scheduling of the employees and things like that. You need both, right? Entrepreneurs tend to feel really comfortable with the risk. So I'll tell you an entrepreneurial story, right? If you're an entrepreneur, I remember when Word Magic, the transcription and translation company, was kind of taking off, it was 2 a.m. and my partner and I had this flood of requests that came in. And so it was this immediate kind of cycle of fear of like being petrified, right? Of how are we going to respond to it all? And then managing our way through it. Actually, one of the best lessons I learned like at 2 a.m. that night was then my partner looking at me and being like, hey, manage your way through this, as opposed to my immediate response that I, the individual who had the skill, okay, I better just get get working. I better get to transcribing of like, no, leverage your resources, leverage the knowledge you have, leverage all the people that you know to kind of manage your way out of a situation, right? And then it turned from like fear and absolute terror, being terror, turned to like this intense excitement of like, okay, we can do this, So if you don't like that, if that doesn't sound good to you, if that feels like, no, my heart's going to drop, like into my stomach and I don't like that feeling, that's something that entrepreneurs tend to thrive off of, entrepreneurs tend to thrive also off of, they're very risk tolerant, right? They are okay with dealing with high amounts of risk. The fact that I told you, right, that like I put in $20,000 into a business and I was okay with that leaving, right? That's a little bit of, that entrepreneurial mindset. If you don't have that, it doesn't mean you can't own a business, it doesn't mean you can't do those things, but it's just important to know, because I think so much of, entrepreneurship is also about making good use of your failures, using the failures as a model for a lesson. And that's another trait. Business owners tend to like minimal risk or calculated risk or less risk. They tend to be prepared. Again, we need both. The entrepreneur needs the business owner to be able to operationalize the work that they do. And then some people happen to have both traits, right? I would say Carmen and I are people who tend to have both, both traits. But even though, we have both traits, somebody has to do the work and take responsibility for paying the taxes and doing all that kind of stuff and documenting information. All these other words, that you see on the page, I think they're just other ways, right, of talking about entrepreneurship. I know for sure that, as I bring in kind of a personal story, that although I knew that I was going to be an academic, I knew that I wanted to be a psychologist and that a PhD was in store. Even when I was learning and when I was an undergrad, I still told myself, I was like, oh, but I'm going to write books. I'm going to do something. I'm always going to hustle, And so I always thought of myself of like, I'm just going to be an educated hustler. And I think also one of the things that we like talking about with this is, I don't think we realize that although you work for someone else, especially as an academic, even though you work for someone else, you are still always kind of being your own independent contractor, your own subcontractor. And if that makes sense to you, that like, yeah, you're giving me a check, but I'm still leveraging and negotiating my value and my worth, and I can take my service here and here and, to all these other places, you definitely have like the beginnings of that like kind of independent contractor, subcontractor, mindset. You're somebody who maybe wants to be self-employed, And so again, I'm just trying to give you all these examples because I want you to see these things kind of on a range, as opposed to you either are it or you're not it. What else? What else did I want to share here? I'm trying to remember. I also, in this conversation, right, I wanted you all to be able to take quizzes and to have resources of like, kind of where do I fit in? And so let me share that link really fast, just so, and what I love about this link is that it is bilingual as well. So for folks who are Spanish speaking, I'm going to encourage you all actually, even right now, to take this quiz. And it's 25 questions. It's online, easy to access. 1 second, let me put it on Facebook for people who are following us there. We're doing a lot today, going back and forth in so many ways. That's cool. Yay, technology. But anyway, yeah, I want to encourage you all, if you have the time and you want to take it, right, the quiz, take it, for somebody who has never owned a business before, who is just thinking about, I think I want to do this, to be able to have something to realistically take you through the mindset, which is so much of what business ownership and entrepreneurship is. It's a mindset, right? Because we all work. All of us are going to do things. We're going to use our day to work in some capacity. The only difference is, do I want the security of a paycheck? Do I not want the responsibility of creating the thing that I'm working for? And that's fine. If you know it's important to know yourself. If you don't want that, don't start a business, right? Because there's some real pressure, and people either like that or they don't. but it's good to have these types of questions offered to you where you can kind of see almost like, do I have the personality for it? Also, although I'm talking about the personality for entrepreneurship, I also want people to hear you can learn these skills. So somebody who's an amazing entrepreneur did not start that way. They had a little bit of personality. They probably, I'll be honest, they probably had a little bit of support with capital, like and help, money to get something started. And they just had like me, they had just had somebody in the background being like, yeah, go ahead, do this. I think you can, even if we pull on activist roots, it only takes one person, we only need the support and to feel like we're standing with one other person to be able to do something that's difficult and challenging. Entrepreneurship and activism are in that way are no different, so to just have the one or two supporters and people you can talk about often is enough, to feel like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try my best, right, to execute this. All right, so we want to kind of, Carmen, I kind of need to figure this out with you. So we wanted to give you all a tiny break if you wanted it, but I realize that we're live, right? And so I'm thinking about that. And I also want to give you all time to complete the quiz if you'd like. How should we negotiate all the things that we're negotiating right now, Carmen? What do you think?
I think we could keep going and maybe at the end leave some time for
Okay.
folks who play some music while they complete their, and then we'll leave it open for any questions or things like that.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for helping me problem solve. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's see. Now we want to start to talk about, we've already been talking about, right, the roses and the thorns, the advantages, the disadvantages, all the things that we've learned. And so I'll turn it to you, Carmen, to start us off with that.
Okay, perfect. So the thorns, like for me, and I put a picture of a nopal, a cactus right here, because sometimes that's how it feels when I'm being an entrepreneur. So just fear of the unknown. A lot of times, like Enjolie mentioned, the business owner versus the entrepreneur. The business owner is just going to be, not knowing where to start. Like I just want to run the business. I just want to have a business. I don't know how to get there. But the entrepreneur will be like, okay, let's set things up in phases, or let's have a plan, or let's think of different ways to, and then like Enjolie mentioned, not all business owners are entrepreneurs. So it's knowing how to negotiate that, or how to, maybe you need to bring somebody in for that, so there's different things to keep in mind. Another thorn could be just the business of doing business. So for a lot of folks, like we mentioned, some of us come from different backgrounds, whether it be an organizer, a student, at the end of the day, it is business. But the great thing about being self-employed is it's all up to you. You're putting the energy you're putting out is what's coming back into you, for support. The internet is a thorn only because there's so many different businesses. Think of food, food business. You're competing against hundreds, thousands on a daily basis, foreign market competitors, just depending on what you're doing. Maybe what I could think of specifically is if something's made in China, it's going to be a lot cheaper than something that's fair trade, So having that comparison of, but then promoting, that's another thing, is on the flip side of that, is promoting that it's a fair trade item, promoting that it's made locally, promoting that it's supports local creatives, things like that. And then, excuse me, navigating the industry could be hard for folks, especially starting off. Starting off, it's going to be hard for people to know, do I start? How do I build? How, we haven't even touched on like marketing, and so that's another aspect to think of. And because if you're self-employed, you're always going to be busy in the business, like Brian would always speak. Brian's my husband, by the way. So we always talk about how, we're in the business, we're in it, that sometimes we don't get to enjoy anything yet, and it just depends on where we're at with our different businesses. Like saying, okay, when like this weekend we were out of town, yay, we're small business owners, but we finally get a weekend to go enjoy, our family and in each other. Or do you want me to just keep going?
Sorry, I do, Daryl, I'm not in the place with the best of internet, so I finally understood what you were asking me right now. Um, yeah, I think some of the other thorns that I want to add, great, sorry, and I'm also managing that we had a new person enter into the room, so I wanted to make sure that, somebody didn't need translation. So all the background, all the stuff going on in the background right now. So thank you, Alma, for letting us know that you're okay. So yeah, I think some of the thorns as well. I think the biggest one is that as a business owner and entrepreneur, you can feel so different from your loved ones, and you can feel so different from your friends and family, and they may not understand that. And so, to kind of make sure that you're building up, I would say, like, your team of people that you because I know I have felt very lonely at different times with, like, my ideas, and almost feeling like I'm crazy, for the things that I want to do. And it doesn't mean that you only have to have people around you that understand entrepreneurship, but people around you that can see you and then can support you. Because I can think of my siblings, I can think of an aunt, that I have that are really important to me. They are not entrepreneurial, but they recognize my talents and skills and like, no, this is you. And so even though I can't tell you how to do this better, I'm going to support that you have the skills and the ability to carry this forward. Also, I think like I talked about, if you're, who you're going into business with can be a really big thorn, so that's why, often, like, well, people will say, like, don't go into business with friends, don't go into business with family. I have to be honest, I don't believe in that, even though I've been burned. I think it's okay, but what I would say is, make sure that you have a lot of challenging conversations and know that it will change dynamics, and I'll more so, instead of don't go into business with friends and don't go into business with family, I would say make sure that you realize that you can't do it with every friend and every family member. And that's because your personalities need to mesh, your ethics need to mesh, your working styles need to mesh. All the things that we kind of work out in a 9-to-5 job, but then we just go home and unload and have the conversation with a partner of like, oh, this person frustrates me so much. You need to have those conversations before you start the business with somebody that because those things are going to happen, and there isn't going to be anywhere to retreat, and most of the time when businesses fail, it often is around the personality dynamics. It's around the people dynamics, and also recognizing that if you're starting a business with someone else, it's pretty much like a marriage, and so if you think about a long-term committed relationship with somebody, and that you have to learn them, you evolve with them, you're growing with them, and that's not always pleasant and comfortable, that's we don't talk about that, I think, enough in business ownership and entrepreneurship. So you want to come to it with the same lens. That's all I wanted to add for that. I'll let you do the roses, and then I'll say more then.
Sounds good. So some roses or some benefits of an entrepreneur is that which could be seen as a thorn as well, that you're completely dependent on yourself or ourselves, depending on who you're in business with. At times, as you're getting started, if you don't have an initial capital helping you out, or investors or people that you're building this with, the human capital as well is, building your business credit, being able to establish if it's a product thing, something you're sourcing, there's different barriers for that. Setting schedules, like I said, spending time for yourself could be hard and challenging at times. Learning about ourselves, and I included this as individuals and a partnership, as a wife and as a mother, is figuring stuff, learning who you are, still continuously growing and seeing, how, like, for me, I'm always thinking of, like, how does this benefit my family? Like, how does this benefit, how always busy, does this benefit my children? So sometimes it's also, for me, it's scheduling specific times, specific days to do certain things pertaining to the business, because that's the only way I could see my kids, or that's the only way I could take care of myself, different things like that. And like I mentioned before, you don't want to exploit yourself. You don't want to avoid burnout, because that's not, at the end of the day, that's not, you know, through community, through doing different things. Last thing you want to do is burn out, you know. Enjolie mentioned, I also acknowledge, you know, involving family, extended family as much as possible. You know, when we first started our food truck, you know, I needed to have somebody watching the kids because I couldn't have them with me. And then 3 of my sisters showed up to help us at an event, you know. So on that food truck, there was 4 of us, and they were our family, you know, wanting to support, wanting to help us out. And then I also, as a result of others grow, and this is what we're doing today, you know, helping, how can we support other stay-at-home parents, other people looking to this, to think of how can you grow yourself, how can you support yourself that way, and not having to rely on these different systems, like finding different ways to use this type of system as an entrepreneur to support yourself. Like I said, healing and health promotion, focusing on yourself and your family at that time, your mental health also, you know, especially when it comes to so many things happening around us, and setting the time apart, be able to focus on your mental health, physical health, spiritual health. It's huge, you know. Motivating others to follow their passion. You know, a lot of times we had one of our, who's a photographer and videographer, tell us, you know, she actually mentioned it to myself and Brian, my husband, was, you motivated me to quit my job at the university and started her own consulting firm as a videographer, you know. And so we're like, oh, that was after a few conversations just about what we were doing, where our businesses were, you know. And I told her, you can do it, you know, just create your own timeline of what you envision for that and make it happen. And a few months later, she said, you know, you guys just motivated us, motivated me to, and I quit. She quit her job at the university, you know. So it happens, you know, and it's beautiful to see now her work out in, you know, with city council and at the city and things like that. So it's a scary jump to take, a scary leap, but it's definitely worth it when you're your own boss. Enjolie, did you want to add anything else?
Yes, actually, I can directly, you know, add to what you're saying, you know, because that's actually, I took that leap again, you know, for myself in January. You know, previously I was a full-time professor, and just about to kind of get tenure, but I knew that when I went into academia, you know, years ago, for 4.5, well, now I guess it would have been 5.5 years ago. But anyway, when I went in, what I needed in my life at that time was actually security. And because I had the experience of owning previous businesses, I knew that I was not going to have the mental health capacity and really like the time. You know what I mean? I knew that I was like, I'm not going to be able to wake up at 2 a.m. and respond to something. And again, not all entrepreneurship is that way, but that was my model. You know, I knew what it took for me. So I really appreciate, you know, Carmen, what Carmen mentioned here about attending to your mental health. So because of that, I took what for me felt like a secure job. And actually, I'm the type of person, so I've shared this in different spaces, where I actually don't feel comfortable with just one paycheck strand or one paycheck stream, you know, or income stream. I feel better when I have multiple streams of income because of some of the experiences that I lived with my family and my parents, right? And let me share that story really fast. So when I was a teen, my parents got caught up in some of these economic cycles that come every 10 to 15 years. They come like clockwork. And we lost our home, right? We were in private school, so there was the real serious conversation of, I don't know if we can pay your tuition, and so I don't know if you can continue to go to the same school that you go to. And that actually was a really important moment for me to recognize that, okay, I will accept education, you know, the things that I want to do require that, but that I'm never going to just kind of rely on just one income stream. And so those are the things that actually cultivated like an entrepreneurial spirit, right, in me. But anyway, so all that to kind of connect to, yeah, we all have different levels of security, you know, and I think that there are the people, and Carmen and Brian are absolutely so inspiring, you know, there are the people who build things like this collective, right? There are people who build things that inspire you and that give you enough energy to move forward and to feel like, okay, I can take that risk. And especially once you've done it, or if you can pull back on what are some of the calculated risks you took, you know, can you deal with that? Is that comfortable for you? How long can you deal with that? And then just the basic stuff. How much money do you have in savings, right? How much money do you anticipate kind of coming either into the business or the organization? Those were the things that helped me take the leap, you know? And then also knowing that like I was comfortable. That's one of your questions in your quiz. I knew in January when I took the leap to leave academia to you know do nonprofit work full time, that I was okay with eating like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches if I really had to. You know what I mean? I was okay with like, I knew in my mind these are the people I'll ask for support, financial support if I need to. This is the amount of money that I have. I could scale it. I could see both ways. If I had to do with less, right? What I would do, and also what amounts I needed to feel secure to pay my bills, and then what was the surplus, right? So operationalizing the amounts that you need to support yourself, the resources that you need to support yourself, that is really helpful for you to feel comfortable. Because I think so many times we only think about entrepreneurship as like, I'm just going to take the leap. No, your leap can be very calculated, and you'll actually feel really good about that. And you'll be a better business owner and entrepreneur if you can see all the stages for you to kind of get to a place of greater comfort. Also, the last thing I'll add to this, no, two things. One, the freedom. That for me, like it's really important to know your value set. And I can throw in a link here later, but a values card sort. So all of us have certain values that we bring, that we're taught traditionally, but also that we bring into our business or into our working world. Freedom. So for me to have freedom is at the top, always at the very top of my value set. That's why doing my own thing, right, is always kind of really well suited for me, because I'd rather have freedom over security. I really would. People kind of hate that about me if they're not the same way. You know, I've had bosses. In fact, when I left, I'll share, when I left the college, that was actually what my president said. He's like, oh, you do not value security. No, I don't. I value like expression and freedom and the ability to do my thing. So I'm sharing these, you know, not to like highlight myself, but just to give you like real examples, you know. There was one more thing after freedom that I wanted to share. Let's see, I'm trying to pull in. Let's see, did it leave? I don't know, but I had another thought. So I include this one more thing. Oh, got it. I remember. Okay. So what I was going to share is that, yeah, the transcription and translation company that I had at one point had up to 40 employees. It is a really beautiful, or subcontractors. It's a really beautiful experience to pay people and to generate, I don't even want to say wealth, to generate business, to generate work that then provides for other people in a way that is dignified, in a way that cares for them and their whole family and their entire community. That is just, there's a lot of beautiful moments I've had in my life, and that's one of them, to know that like somebody can be not only the employee that they want to be, but the partner, the spouse they want to be, the parent they want to be, because of like what has been created through your entrepreneurship or your business ownership. So it's just a really beautiful feeling. The other thing last thing too, and I was going to share is that I think back to that this is old. I started off at the beginning of our time together of like, this is nothing new, you know? So my grandmothers, they were both seamstresses. And so I also connect quite a bit to Carmen's story with this, but my grandmother used to, my maternal grandmother used to make the uniforms for the private school that my mother and aunts and, you know, uncle, that they were in. And then that was the form of her paying their tuition, because she was, you know, although married, you can hear all the complications, right? Although married, she was kind of operating like a single mom, right? And like a single woman. And so, you know, when I think back to what the work of the collective and that we focus on traditional ways and ancestral ways, it's in our DNA, it's in my DNA, you know, to kind of figure things out and hustle, right? And to use a skill that you have to take a little bit of your education and knowledge set, right? Your craft, and then try to monetize that to facilitate your life. Even if it's not for direct payment, you know, for it to facilitate a resource, right? Same thing, you know, I think about my paternal grandmother. She did a lot of things. She was a barber, she was a seamstress, she worked like in an electronics factory, she was an artist, she liked to, you know, kind of road shows for artistic things, you know. So anyway, when I get insecure, or, you know, I think I wonder if I should be somewhere, like, no, imagine how my grandmothers felt, you know, when they were immigrating and trying to kind of make a way. So I say that as a way of encouragement. And like, the best ways that I'm able to kind of sometimes connect to that is when I'm doing my own thing, you know, when I am acting as an entrepreneur and a business owner. So, you know, I just want to also feel like you're not alone. You're probably not alone. Like, go back and have these conversations of like the business entities or the risks that some of your family members took, and they're probably going to be along the lines of the, you know, of entrepreneurship and business ownership. So, okay, I say about that much on this slide. That was a lot.
I'll go ahead and just skip this one. It's just showing, you know, things, how we were able to grow the business to individual businesses, from the garage to having a 3,800 square foot facility, you know. But I want to also echo what Enjolie mentioned about, you know, being able to support. That's why I consider myself a social entrepreneur, because for me, I like the fact that we're able to support people, you know, and be able to have people showing their trade, their artwork, their own form of expression, but then being able to be supported financially for that. So that for me, for us, really, like, our goal is to make sure that we're paying people properly, dignified, and that they're being respected, you know, and their families are being respected. So that's how we function, we being, you know, Brian and I. And there we have our contact info. But of course, we're not done, because I'm just going to stop screen sharing after this. But we will go ahead and add our contact info in the chat as well for you to access. I just listed the various websites for different things that we've worked on, along with email addresses if anybody would like to get a hold of us. Anjali's info as well, but we will share that in the chat as well. So at this time, let me go ahead and stop sharing this. Let me make sure that's the last. Yes, it's the last. And open it up to maybe any questions that anybody may have, or maybe taking, Anjali, I don't know if you want to take that time now to do the quiz. Maybe we reshare that. But I just wanted to also just express how, because I know there could be some new parents joining us right now. And so I just want to just express that, like, whatever talents you have, whatever you do, for me, when I started Indigena, wanting I was sewing and doing things like my mom had showed me to do, is because I knew that's something I could do. I had already received my culinary degree and my undergrad degree, like all this stuff, right? But for me, the most natural thing was to sew, because I could do that holding my daughter on my back. You know, like, I was trying to find ways to be able to still hold my daughter with me, or have my children with me, that wouldn't harm them, and that I could still, like, right now, like, even other times with catering, I can't have my kids with me in the kitchen, you know. So because they were so small, I could still wear them in the rebozo, and you know, carry them that way, feed them when I had to, things like that. So I've tried to find something that I could do with, at that moment, with the resources I had. So I would sew. For a lot of new parents, depending on what you do, if it's photography, if it's other things, I know Perla's joining us, and so I also want to acknowledge the work she does, because she's a photographer, but then she's also takes her kids with her, or wears them on her whenever she's doing photo shoots and things like that. So it's not something impossible. And so I just want to put that out there and acknowledge the mamas, the parents, those out there hustling and doing what they need to do for their family on a day to day, but also doing it with their children, which is for me, that's all I saw growing up because my mom was at home with us the whole time. You know, my parents, that's what they did. And so that I didn't know any different, you know, and so I really wanting to acknowledge that and and yeah, just seeing how we can keep support one another, support everybody here. And I know Enjolie's sharing some links, and there's also a link to a quiz that she provided as well, and to be able to share things. But yeah, just finding the balance, incorporating, you know, call your family, call people for support. I know it's hard. That was another thing for me, which was very difficult to do, is we're not used to asking for help. As mujeres, as you know, community members, we're just not used to that a lot of times. So for me, it was like, okay, sister number 3, come over and watch the kids for me while I got to do this, you know, type thing. And I know it's hard, and we're all spread out so far amongst the city and this continent, you know, is like, who can we call, who can I rely on to be able to help support, you know. But Enjoli, did you want to share?
Sure, yeah. And I just want to open up the conversation for all of you now to, ask your questions if you want to kind of talk through some of the things that you saw in the quiz, right? It's an open time. And I appreciate also, the comments that have been put in the chat, that Carmen kind of just organically, right, started to respond to. I will say for the one thing of like, I don't know, lack of support and that balance, of like that time management balance. It's probably a phrase that's often used. I don't know if that's it. You need to know yourself, so like I'll speak to Carmen is an amazing multitasker. I can't be Carmen, and I'm okay, and so I know that if I had to work with kids, like if I had to work with young kids in tow, that I would need some quiet time, and so kind of middle of the night or times when the kids are away, right, would probably be my time. You have to know yourself, I think the other part too, which Carmen does as well. So she does both, meaning middle of the night work and also multitasking work, right? I think also, if there's an advantage to the pandemic, I think it's that our kids have learned that like, oh, this is working time, some of our kids have learned that this is working time, right? And so the more that we can also incorporate children with the things that we do, and involve them in work, they also tend to understand like, okay, no, this is work time. And yes, the work sometimes is slower when we're incorporating our children, but if they can kind of come alongside of like an understanding what work time is and how they can contribute, we can steal the 30 minutes of dedicated time and the hour cobbling together, right? All of that time to get a task completed. But ultimately, yeah, like I know at one point for myself that I realized that if you care about anything, you're going to work hard. If you care about anything, you're going to work long hours, whether somebody's giving you a paycheck or whether you're doing it on your own, so it's not, we're never going to escape that, that like we're trying to, if it's a passion, if it's something that we love, that we're going to be trying to find time among all of our other varied responsibilities. And then using, as Carmen said, using community, like especially like, us that are within the collective, us using one another, as supports. And those of us who are like watching this and you're not part of our collective, creating that sense of community for yourself and those people that you can help you, like watch your kids for this time so you can do things and all that good stuff. So anyway, I'm gonna stop talking so y'all can ask your questions.
I did
Questions.
want to touch on one thing is especially because I know Perla made a comment in the chat about like especially having the multiple children. So it is harder, but that's where we came to a point with Brian and I with all our businesses was like the only way I could be present more in the businesses is that's when we hired somebody to help us with the kids. And so I know starting off it's difficult, maybe per gig, being able to pay somebody that way, or evaluating that, incorporating that into what your fee is, being able to say like, I need childcare. Okay, then this is what your cost is for like a session or a consult or things like that. Like include it into what you're charging into your bundle, because that's the only way to pay for, you know, not only yourself and your time, but then also making sure your kids are taken care of. So if the kids can come with you, you know, making sure that you're able to support that one, that support, yeah, exactly, adding that to your overhead for somebody to cover that time. And I know it's hard when you think of like having somebody else watch your kids too at times, but that was the only way. And we had to do that, especially when we had the food truck. Like there was no way I could have three little ones and a newborn at that on the food truck with me. You know, we had to figure out a way, and that's when we hired our friend at the time, and then now my sister helps us with that, you know. And so, and being able to help her, you know, because she was unemployed at the time. So how can we support one another as a community, you know? But it is hard, especially when like for me, my parenting style is a little different than others. And so depending on your comfort zone levels with leaving your child, or even for me, like as I just send them outside sometimes, I just go play, you know, let me finish this real quick. I'm okay with that, but I know some parents might not be, you know, and I'm okay if they're playing and they're, you know, just go shower right after, you know, something like that. So it just really depends on what you're comfortable with and what your kids like to do as well. But I just wanted to make a point of that, because I know that's what a lot of people struggle with is childcare. And the childcare, I had one friend, you know, at one of my commercial kitchens and said, like, I want to set up a daycare here so Maria could come to the kitchen and not have to worry about her kids, you know? And so that was like, oh, that's great. That's nice. But we can't do that here, you know? It's a kitchen. So just finding different alternatives, you know, like trying to see what can we do to help each other out, you know? And then another thing is I love talking to my kids. Our kids know what we do. You know, they know that. And then I loved it because she was only maybe like 4 when we had the food truck. Kisani, who's now 6. She said, Mama, you're going to go feed the people now? And I said, yes, baby, I'm going to go feed the people. She goes, okay, go feed the people. You know, like she was okay with me leaving her so I could go feed the people, you know? And so she put it that way. So she understood what we were doing. And in her mind, she's like, okay, Mom, I'll see you when you get home. You know, she understood that. So that's something really us communicating, including them when we can as much as possible, but also knowing that like, oh, you know, this is my time. I need to have my break. I need to keep my mental health intact because it's a lot, you know. But yeah, I'll go ahead and we'll open it up to if there's any other questions anybody may have, and or maybe we could give some recommendations to what might help you. Anybody? Maybe any comments? If anybody, you know, something that stuck with you during the almost 2 hours we've been talking. And then you could go ahead and unmute yourself.
Mm-hmm. So thank you. We have, oh, you know what? We can probably turn off translation, Carmen. I think you have the ability to do that so that Frida can share, because we can't hear her voice, but I'm going to read your comment right now. So you're saying you took the quiz and then your results, you're not a natural, but you can probably learn to be an entrepreneur. Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's a skill, you know, it is not, there are parts that we have talents, there are innate parts, you know, to our personality, but
can you hear me, Enjolie? Frida, did you want to go ahead? Oh, we can hear you.
Oh, I could, yeah, I thought it was my internet, but I think Enjolie froze up.
Yeah, you froze up, Enjolie.
Sorry, everyone.
Sorry, you were in the middle of saying something.
Go ahead, Frida. I was probably just summarizing. So, but go ahead and Frida, just if you wanted to talk about your results and what you learned from it.
No, I mean, I think it was interesting to take that quiz, you know, because I know that maybe I don't have I think that it was really interesting to hear both of you weave it into your family stories and kind of what has led you to be an entrepreneur. Because for me, it's been the opposite with where both of my parents are like, and I grew up as like, they're both artists. And so they grew up hustling in a way that was very uncertain all the time. And that also the wellness of our home depended on whether my dad or my mom had a project, you know, and so it was always like, and sometimes also because they were the same profession. I mean, this is kind of getting like more in terms of the personal thing, you know, but in terms of how it creates and, you know, the psyche and then how you choose your path, right? Based on things like sometimes my dad had a really good project, my mom didn't, you know, and so then there was tension, and then my mom did, and then and my mom and my daughter calls me Frida now. Sí, mi amor. Sí, cierra la puerta, mi amor, por favor. Ok, muchas gracias. Sí, mi amor. Sí, estoy en un meeting. Okay, bye.
Okay.
No. I didn't even have that. Ese es el ejemplo. That is the example right there of how the kids understand, you know, and they're learning this little process.
Yeah.
Your little jefa right there.
Yeah, she knows that Carlos has a lot of meetings. And so whenever he can't go with us somewhere, she's like, you have a meeting? Yes. But then today I was like, I have a meeting today, not your dad. Your dad's going to take you to your lesson, but I have a meeting. And she's like, okay. So yeah, I totally understand what you were commenting about that. But anyways, just to kind of go back, like it's really beautiful to hear, you know, how our path is woven, because that really the uncertainty in my household because of my parents' profession and because of their competitive within their profession, the competitiveness between both of them, that really led me to not, even though I was a dancer, and like to not dedicate myself to the arts at all in any way, and to have a 9-to-5 job and to love like sitting at a desk and like knowing what to expect and having health insurance, and knowing, you know, how things were going to flow for me. And so that's why I became, you know, went into like public health, and I have, you know, a lot of the time was the only one that had like health insurance in my family, you know, because that's just how I flow. So, but, you know, I definitely appreciate, and I, you know, and then even though I was thinking, no, like, maybe, yeah, I'm definitely not like the natural entrepreneur, but, you know, when I was in Iowa, I started doing more of the consulting work, and even my LinkedIn right now, when you see it, it says like I'm a consultant. And so it's, you know, it's something that is always a good alternative, especially when you're approached by organizations like, oh yes, I do have this skill, let me provide it for you, know, I can provide it. But it's also an alternative, like right now that I'm going to start graduate school, you know, being dependent of that TA-ship. There's one mom that connected with me that's doing the program right now, and she's married to somebody that's at ASU, so she has most of her tuition covered. But then she, instead of doing a TA-ship, she's doing like entrepreneurship, and so she works as a consultant for like different things. And so it's and as a mom, you know, even when I was still in therapy in Mexico City, and I still didn't even have a child, like I remember talking about this conversation with my therapist about like, it's, you know, this, the independent consulting can be a really good way of having the life that you want to have and being the mother that you want to be, you know, and being that, you know, having that presence, you know, in your child's life. So yeah, so thank you for that reminder, and for that there is always a possibility, especially also when there's like, you know, a beautiful community that supports and models it for you. So thanks.
Thank you, Frida. Yes. So many wonderful examples, like you wove together so many of the things that we talked about just in your sharing. And I think the one thing that I want to highlight, like you said, is we can't unwind, we can't remove the parts of like our family experience and how that shapes us and what we think about our relationship to money, our relationship to entrepreneurialism and business ownership, or our need for stability and security, and that's just a part of the story. There's no right or wrong, like those are our family paths. um, I also wanted to acknowledge that there's a comment in the chat. So I started another business a few years ago and it went well, but when the pandemic hit, I had to switch gears, and now I'm trying to apply what I learned. Hi, Jessica. Apply what I learned from that into this new path that I'm on. Do you want to share any more, or do you?
Sure. The previous business was in a completely different industry. So I'm currently in birth work, and previously I worked in the fashion industry. So the population I worked with, so different, everything about it. It's a completely different animal. But at the same time, I'm starting to see similarities just about how to grow my business and how to handle it. But I definitely am still learning how to navigate through certain things that I did not have to before. There was always a certain type of urgency in my previous, she's gonna start barking, in my previous work, and the same thing continues now. But the way I feel about that urgency and how I deal with it is different. But there's so many different elements. So sometimes it feels very familiar, and then other times I feel like I'm on another planet.
I think, thank you for sharing, just the reality of the transition, and then also like what it takes to do the work that you do. I think one of the aspects of the pandemic is that I learned, and I think the collective for sure learned, is that we had to all of us to leverage technology. So what we're doing now. A year ago today, well, maybe a year ago today, 15 months ago today, I don't think any of us knew what the heck StreamYard was. None of us knew how to stream content to Zoom, from Zoom to Facebook and all these things that we're doing. And so that reliance on technology is I think one of the biggest things that we've had to learn, and that has helped the businesses or the individuals who are thriving. And if you can't, and we talked about this earlier, if you can't do it feeling like you have the connections and the resources to other people or the organizations that can help you kind of leverage technology, because the way that we have to connect with people so often, even our marketing now, is so much based on social media. Carmen, did you want to add something in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge something that what Frida had mentioned was, her the kind of like that the trauma associated with being a child of entrepreneurs. I'm right there too. Like we experience the same thing. The sastreria isn't something very, when we had a one mariachi and it was 12 people, then at least we knew 12 suits were going to be coming in. Other times things were seasonal or gearing up to either 16 de septiembre or Cinco de Mayo or the big fiesta times. Other than that, my parents were working the fields. My parents were doing other things, they had to come up with something. And so for me, when I worked nonprofit prior to being an entrepreneur, it was because of that. Like I wanted to have that stability. I wanted to have that, for me, seen growing up a certain way. Like I didn't want to have that. And so that's when I was 23 and I bought my first house. And I was like, people were like, how are you 23 and you're buying a house? I was like, because I want to have somewhere to live. Like for me, it was more the security aspect. And then, but then once I became a mom, things shifted. Once it definitely shifted to where it's like, being laid off for the first time after 10 plus years in the nonprofit field was like, what do I have to do? Like it was definitely a mind fuck, pretty much. Sorry for cussing, if that's what it was, because I had to think of what can I physically do with the newborn, and what kind of, so I hear you. I hear the struggles. Child of entrepreneurs, and my dad at the time also our childhood, not to share too much, but like he was an alcoholic as we grew up. We lost houses, we moved all the time. So for me it was like, nope, I have a house. Like I need something to keep me stable. So just wanting to just to share that, and that I feel you, Frida, same thing. But it was a shift that I had to make, because for me at the time that was my survival mode. you know After being laid off, it was like, okay, what do I need to do to survive? So I went into like reaction mode, in a sense.
Thank you for sharing, Carmen. There's a lot of like content around like healer activists or excuse me, wounded healers and wounded activists, and the work that we do out of like wounding, right? And how it impacts us. And so, yeah, we get to do all these great things, but then we kind of end up messing up some relationships, or messing up finances, but whether it's a wounded activist or a wounded healer or a wounded entrepreneur, right? The emphasis on that healing. If you can still heal those parts, you're going to make so much more better and stable decisions, and that, like what you said, Carmen, what you're good at and what you naturally do might be a part of the survival mode, but then when you heal that, then you can start to do things like in a more stable way, whatever stability means for you, and that's just part of like that evolution. I also love how the conversation is going to of that, like, there are ebbs and flows. There are times that we need and want security, and there's times that we're willing to take a plunge, and it's not only one thing that you're going to do for the rest of your life, so thank you, Jessica, for your comments. And so, I think, if there aren't any last minute questions or stories that you all want to share, connect to, I think we'll think about wrapping this up, and you all have ways to connect to us and reach out to us if you want to continue individual conversations. Okay. All right.
Okay. Well, if I could just jump in real quick, just to say thank you to everybody, and also the birth workers. Hang in there. I know there's a lot, and the parents, hang in there. Like we see you, we hold you. However we could be of support. We left our contact info in the email. And then we could always do one if anybody else is, pertaining to your specific field, whether it be birth work or whether it be consulting, like in education or things like that. We could definitely try to tailor something for you, or just meet one-on-one as well. We're open for that, and how we could help support. And just thank you, everybody. And thanks for being patient with us with their technology and going back and forth. And safe travels to Enjolie, who's in California, heading back this way to Arizona. And just hoping, just holding everybody here today. And just, if you have any words, Enjolie, I'm getting the smoke ready just to close us off.
I'm good. No, I'm good. I appreciate everyone, just from my heart. And, I care for a lot of you, and even the ones that are newer folks and friends, I'm appreciating seeing you kind of around this circle. And then Carmen, I just appreciate you for your example, and all the things that you hold and the care that you carry and how gracefully you do it. So I just want to appreciate you too.
Oh, thank you. I don't know where I'm at sometimes, but we make stuff happen. I'm a hot mess, like having made some food or carried the kids, or they're fighting over something. It happens, but we make it. We keep going. So
we're still gonna have our eyebrows on, and we're still gonna have our lipstick on.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and those watching via Facebook. Just thank you. Have a great day. Offering some medicine here for each of you. And just, again, I wish you could smell it, but if you have your own medicine, please feel free to light some, inhale, take a quick little break especially after we finish up here, take a break off the computer, stand up, move around, drink some water, take care of yourself, and hope you have a great day. That's lo que Mati. Thank you. Gracias.
Yeah. Same. I was like, it's still live.
I was trying. Okay.
No, it's gone now.